Good afternoon and welcome to the October Resident Council meeting. Glad you're here and you want to visit, and feel free to stay afterwards and continue. I'm Fran Baker, current president, and we always begin with Janet Crowell, our vice president, who's going to welcome lots of new faces today, we hope.
It's a good thing I don't know or have to remember who's new faces. So if you would raise your hand, if you are first time to resident council. Oh, I see a new one back here. Okay. I'll get that side. We would like to know your name, where you moved from, where you live now, and how long you've been in the village.
Well, my name is Pat Conaway. I moved from Marshall. Lived on a small farm there. I moved on September 16th, and I live in D building. So,
Well, we welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of us. Anyone else back here? Okay.
hi, my name is Pat Conaway, and I moved from Marshall. I live in D building. I came here on September 16th.
What a memory.
I just told her all that.
Did you get that, Barbara? Okay. Well, you can come visit with her afterwards. Anyone else back here that first time visiting? How about up here? I hear my name. Oh. Hello.
My name is Kay Cox, and I live in Courtyard A, and I moved here from Independence, but I hadn't lived there long. I really moved from Washington, D.C., and I've been here 4 years, but I've been over in where have I been? I've been over in Lindbergh.
Well, we welcome you to resident council. Come back. Anyone up here? Okay. As a reminder, don't forget to invite your neighbors or new residents that have moved in. This is a really great place to hear some good speakers and to get to socialize.
Thank you, Janet. And now we'll have some announcements or updates from Maria Timberlake. She's Vice President of Senior Living.
How about those Chiefs? Woo! That was fun watching that last night. I enjoyed that. I stayed up past my bedtime to watch it. How about Peace Parkway? Yay! And O'Brien. Yay! Okay, it would have been nice if the city told us in advance that they were doing that, instead of me coming in at 7 in the morning and calling Eric and saying, why is somebody milling down O'Brien Road? But that's okay. They can do as many streets as they want, right, of their streets. So anyway, exciting stuff. How many of you attended the Aging in Place workshop last week? Oh, a good amount of you. Did you get your flu shot? I got mine this morning, so okay, good. I've heard positive things about it. Hope maybe you learned something new or took away some information you didn't have before about our services. Sometimes we know things are here, but until they're really relevant, we don't necessarily absorb all the information. So hopefully you guys found some good information, maybe got a few little giveaways and enjoyed that. Speaking of shots, yes, we will be doing COVID shots, booster shots again. So it's like different verse, same as the first. However, I think we're going to do them a little bit differently, because if you remember at the very beginning, you guys were hunkered down in your homes, and we had a lot of staff people who weren't doing their normal jobs, right? So we scheduled it very deliberately, but since then you guys have gotten busy, and when we assign you a time, you say, I can't do that, I'm going to the new theater, or I can't do that, I have a hair appointment. So we're going to loosen that up a little bit, and hopefully it'll go just as well, but we're going to try to add more flexibility for you all, but that will change it a little bit, so we'll just hope that it goes as well as the past ones. We don't have a date yet. We're working with Cimbria. They do not have a big enough supply of the vaccine to accommodate us, and so we're kind of going to push it out because we don't want to schedule it and then them not have it and us have to schedule it again. So instead, we're just going to push it out a little bit. So we should have more concrete information in a week or so, I'm hoping. And, speaking of COVID, I don't know if you all saw the e-blast that due to some changes in the CDC that have then passed down to the state Health and Human Services, that you can now walk through village assisted living. Yay. I know some of it, yes, exactly. Visitors are supposed to wear a mask. So Anthony and Marie, who's the administrator over there, just ask that if you're walking through, I did that today. I hadn't walked through there in a long time, but I just put my mask on right before I went in and took it off when I went out. Anthony did say that not all the residents who live there are compliant, but we do ask that anybody just passing through, if you just stick one in your pocket and wear that. And let's see, Asian place flu shot, COVID vaccine. I think that's my list. Thanks, Fran. Thanks, everybody.
And now we'll have our standing committee reports, and we'll start with Joe Chase and just go down the list.
CFO Kim Klockenga gave his August financial presentation to the Finance Committee in the Missouri Room on September 28, 2022. In August, there were 26 sales, which is 13 favorable to budget. On year-to-date basis, sales are 18 over budget. There were 12 move-ins in August, 2 under budget. Total occupancy in independent living was up 4 units, but under budget. Occupancy in the Village Care Center is 124, still under budget. Village Assisted Living occupancy declined slightly, but is still favorable to budget by 15 units. Home health admissions increased in August and is on an upward trend. Hospice census continues to improve. EMS is trending upward and exceeds budget numbers. During August, expenses exceeded revenue by $263,000, which continues to be driven by reduction in cost. Year-to-date revenue is positive by approximately $1.6 million, favorable to budget. This is largely due to VAL occupancy and lower associate healthcare claims. Investment activity had $1.8 million net losses during August. When projected for the fiscal year, entrance fees are expected to be $10.3 million, 90% of what was budgeted. Days of cash on hand decreased by 3 days due to unrealized investment losses, which offset the entrance fee and operating contributions. They continue to be above the covenant level of 120 days. Debt service coverage ratio experienced a slight decline. Net operating margin remains over budget. Action plans. Management created an action plan in July which will focus on several areas and improving staffing. Under senior living, the focus will be on a repricing initiative and promotions to accelerate move-ins. Under assisted living, there have been unit remodeling / upgrades, which would result in a higher monthly fee. 5 have been completed and should be filled by the end of September. Challenges. Staffing continues to be the major challenge. We are seeing varying trends in recruitment and retention, with some positive momentum in hiring. Orientation classes are being held weekly and are full. Turnover is still a part of the problem, and wage compression is still out there to be addressed. Regarding the economy, challenges include the stock market, possible housing market problems that could affect entrance fee move-ins, and inflation-related increase in cost. The next meeting will be held in the Missouri Room on October 26th at 1 o'clock.
Okay, can you hear me? Committee Chair Mary Ann Davis called the September 14th Health Service Committee meeting to order, and the minutes of the August meeting were approved as written. Matthew Pitty, manager of JKV Public Safety, gave the committee members a tour of the EMS quarters and ambulance bays. Those of us who had not previously seen the facilities were appalled by the smallness, troublesome layout of the sleeping rooms, the shortage of facilities, and the teeny kitchen. In the ambulance bays, Matthew explained that the village has 2 full-time ambulances, 1 daytime only ambulance, and 1 part-time. There is room in the bays for 2 ambulances, and 2 have to be parked outside. The equipment in the outside ambulances must be removed every night and restocked every morning. The ambulance bays are situated such that trucks that deliver food to the assisted living restaurants sometimes block the ambulance bays. Our tour underscored the village's desperate need for better EMS ambulance quarters. Gail Benny gave us a quick update on the donations to the gala, expressing her heartfelt gratitude for residents' generosity. She informed us that after the dust clears from the gala, the village plans to approach other foundations and corporations for additional funding to help reach the $2.5 million goal to renovate the former KCIM building, which is located between the Ambassador Room and the D building. Vice President of Health Services, Anthony Calambato, updated us on the September 27th Aging in Place workshop, noting some of the agencies and businesses that will be represented. A representative from Michael J. Fox Foundation, the Parkinson's disease, will attend as well, and a representative from Deer Oaks, an organization with expertise in geriatric behavioral health. He noted that someone from Curana Health, which owns Dr. Tweeter's practice, will attend. Dr. Tweeter's primary focus has been the Village Care Center, and the group wants to expand to the Village Assisted Living and maybe some others. Melanie McGraw, who coordinates health care needs for village residents, will also attend. Finally, it's the best place for residents to get our flu shots. Anthony did not have at that time the information on the other COVID booster. Our next meeting will take place on October 12th, and the meeting was adjourned. Thank you.
I'm Martha Wood. The nominating committee did not meet in September, but we will be meeting tomorrow morning, so this will be very short. There will be openings for both Resident Council President and Resident Council Vice President for the upcoming year. The current Resident Council Vice President, Janet Kroll, has agreed to be a nominee for the Resident Council Presidents. The November Village Voice will include details for applying for these 2 positions. One requirement is to have lived at the village for 2 years, and the other is to have had some participation in the resident council. Thank you.
I'm Carol Jennings, Chairman of the Resident Services Committee. The committee met on September 12 at 9:30 in the administration boardroom. The meeting was called to order by the acting chair, Fran Baker, Karen Burek-Bachman, manager of marketing and communications, and Diane Demarest, Board liaison were present, with Karen serving as facilitator. Also present was Ginger Warner, executive assistant. Maria Timberlake had asked this committee for their input on the JKV handbook. The village is planning on doing the handbook in-house rather than using a commercial printing company. Now would be a good time to see if there are any changes that might be helpful to those using the handbook. Several suggestions were received from the committee. For example, a better explanation of the meal plan. Can the care center residents be listed in the directory? A listing of associates, phone numbers, and email addresses would be helpful. These suggestions, along with many others, were made and taken by Ginger Warner, who will collate them and send them to each department for that department's corrections and revisions. On another subject, a question was raised about the new law that requires a valid ID to vote. A non-driver must go to the DMV to get a non-driver license. Barbara Fredholm will contact Stephanie Zylstra to see about getting this information out to all residents. In new business, it was requested that information about the paving on Peace Parkway and the closures that will follow such work needs to be more detailed and communicated to residents. And I think that was accomplished, and aren't we all happy for the results? There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned. The next meeting will be Monday, October 10. Please contact me if you'd like to attend the meeting. Thank you.
The Sales, Marketing, and Communications Committee met on September the 15th in the Manhattan Room. Home health and hospice marketing is being handled in-house, and 4 team members have been added to the staff. 1 handles referrals in Kansas, and 3 handle the Missouri side. The hospice program has seen an increase of 10 new referrals per month and is currently in the upper 40s and holding budget. Home health had 165 currently in the upper 40s and holding at budget. Home health had 165 last month and currently stands at 207. The outpatient therapy program is growing and is located in the Ambassador Room. Overall, the monthly sales activity for August was strong. Recently, there were 2 sales events for the Meadows 2 expansion with 30 to 40 each in attendance. Lead generation was down with fewer resident referrals, and the sales group is considering additional incentives for JKV residents who make a referral. Gross deposits are well above goal, with most coming from lease contracts. Only a few units remain available at Meadows 2. Campus-wide move-ins were down in August with 12 versus a goal of 14, and there were 8 vacancies in the month. Paying units for August totaled 820, short of the 838 goal. Projected move-ins for the Meadows 2 will begin December the 5th, with 1 move-in in the morning and 1 in the afternoon for each elevator available, involving a variety of logistics. That's going to take a while. Our next meeting will be held on Thursday, October the 20th at the Manhattan Room. If you'd like to attend, please give me a call.
And next we have updates from the ambassadors. Diane Demarest.
Thank you, Fran. We'll lower that a little bit. First and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for all of your generous support of the Born to Be Wild Gala held September 17th. I don't have any final figures to share with you today, but we will next month. But I want to say thank you for those of you who were purchasing a ticket, those of you who worked on neighborhood baskets, and also for bidding on and even buying some of the auction items. And I can hardly wait for the December Lee Summit Symphony because our own Janet Krall and her husband not only bid on but won the guest conductor for the Lee Summit Symphony. So you may want to attend just to see that. Oh, it was a beautiful, beautiful party. And if you missed it, I'm sorry, because that definitely was probably the prettiest gala we've had so far. And I spoke with Steve Clark a little earlier this morning, and there will be pictures coming out before long where you can see some of the lovely things there. Second of all, I want to mention the nut sale. The foundation every year has a booth at the craft show. It's the big fall craft show held at the pavilion every year. So this Friday and Saturday will be the craft show, and we will have a booth there selling nuts. In previous years, not this year, but in previous years, you have been able to go by the ambassador office, Gail Benet's office, and purchase nuts ahead of the sale at the pavilion. That is not true this year. Apparently there was an air conditioning problem in the warehouse, so the chocolate-covered nuts and things had to be moved, and they are already over at the pavilion in a well-stored, secure place. So get yourself out, come browse at the wonderful fun craft show, and buy some nuts. You can use them for your baking, to give away or whatever, and it's a wonderful way, again, to support the foundation. Our next meeting will be Friday, November 4th. We meet at the Meadows Community Room, and I'm pleased to say Kim Klockenga will be our guest speaker. Thank you.
And Kim is our speaker today. Kim Klockenga is Vice President of Finance and CFO at John Knox. And he's going to talk to us about business in the post-pandemic world. Kim.
Well, it's really great to be here. And in fact, it's been a while since I have been at the resident council meeting, and I've forgotten how much great information comes out of this group. I mean, it's real. I think I've learned a few things today as well. So I do appreciate the invitation. All right. And I like to wander around, so I not get tied to a podium. So, I'll try not to make you dizzy while I'm running around. So, but it is good to be here to talk a little bit about what's happened over the last 2 to 3 years. It's been a rather unique time in senior living, a unique time in our economy, to see what has happened over the last 3 years, from starting in 20 with COVID, 21, and now into 22. It's been a very strange time. I don't think even in all of our history that we've seen a time kind of like this. Certainly times much more drastic than this, but it's very peculiar, the way that the economy has really reacted over the last 3 years. Some of the key economic issues that really we've been dealing with, and probably this is not new to you. All of you live in this economy and are struggling through it as much as the village is. But when we look at inflation, the things that are driving it are interest rates. Certainly the Fed's very aggressive, has been moving it up and is planning to continue to move it. And so when we talked about our action plans, and Joe kind of probably gave most of my presentation, so if you were listening carefully, you can go to sleep probably. But we are expecting some headwinds that are going to come into the third and fourth quarter for us because inflation does have a big impact, or the interest rates do have a big impact, in senior living. Supply chain is a real big issue for us. Things that used to take maybe a couple days now take a couple weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks. Some of them are taking even months. And so what does that mean to, is that all of us are probably hoarding a little bit more than what we used to, trying to anticipate that, okay, what I used to go to Amazon and get tomorrow, even my coffee, I used to get it in a day. Now they're saying it's going to take 2 weeks. So the inventory has increased in my coffee. Labor market, I'll talk about that in a little more detail. Obviously, it's a huge issue for us. You guys are experiencing the impact of a lot of that. And oil prices, oil prices really, my experience has been is when oil prices go up, inflation always begins to happen because it trickles down throughout the entire economy, from utilities to transportation, all those things that we use, so much of it is influenced by oil prices. The real estate market has been very hot for a long time, for at least the last 3 months or 3 years. Don't ask me, I never would have anticipated that coming into COVID, saying now housing market, the housing market is so hot, everything is increasing 30, 40, 50%. That's been, the inventory in that market, in the housing market has driven a lot of that. And people now deciding that they're going to work at home, be at home. The home has become a more significant place for people. It has really driven a lot of, that real estate. And, that that's a real big part of senior living because, in theory, the transfer of that asset into an entrance fee is what we kind of count on in our business. And so if people are experiencing a lot of growth there, it means that their homes are going to have more capacity to be able to afford our entrance fee products, right? Global uncertainty, certainly the wars and things like that have really had a pretty significant impact on the supply chain, what's going on in Europe and things like that. So that uncertainty, impacts people's decisions to be proactive or to move forward. They become more hesitant. We have certainly seen that, and it, really has an impact on our GMP as well. The stock market has reflected that. We had a really couple good years actually, and then now, as interest rates have been going up, there's a flee from the market into the bonds. So, that now you should be able to go out and find a CD now for 4%. Probably a year ago, you'd be lucky to find one for 0.4%. So, if there's any good news as far as on the fixed rate side, you're able to find interest rates that are better. But the stock market has really had a very big impact, I'm sure, on many of you, if you looked at your retirements, investments, and it certainly has had an impact on the village as well. And then Medicare, Social Security, taxes. I just kind of lumped all of this together because, is Medicare, from a reimbursement standpoint, it's not really going up as the cost of medical costs are going up. Social Security, typically, it's not going up as much as inflation is going up, so you're always getting behind in that. And then at the end of the day, with all of the government programs, taxes are going up, and so it just really puts a lot of pressure on those living in this this economy. And if you have any questions or comments that you want to make, please raise your hand, because I'm sure somebody would love to hear you ask a question versus me talking for 20 minutes. So the labor market. We know there's a shortage of workers. And it's not because our GMP is driven that there's so much demand out there. You know, what we've seen happen is that there's a lot of retirement. I was looking at some research done by Ziegler and showing that how many jobs, you know, have been open because baby boomers have left the workforce. And so it's a very significant number. And then you look at the number of people that are leaving just because of quality of life. You know, to some degree, you know, the last 2 years have just created a lot of chaos, especially if you have two people working at home or two people working at home. Somebody's got to take care of the kids because nobody knows if the school is going to be open or if it's going to be closed or daycares are going to be open. You know, so, I mean, just the chaos of COVID has really pushed a lot of people out of the workforce as well. So it's not, in large part, a demand issue as much as it's a supply issue. And could that change? You know, with inflation being up at 7, 8, 9%, you know, how long can people only have one, you know, wage earner in the home? That could change. But right now, we're seeing that isn't the case. And then how people want to work. You know, a lot of, you know, during COVID, there was a lot of people working remotely. And to some degree, employers started to look at that and going, well, I don't have to buy the real estate. So that's a good thing. If they work home, you know, that's going to be a good situation. But there's a lot of organizations, especially one like John Knox Village, where that's really not much of an option for us. And so now we're competing with, you know, that labor force that says, I want to work at home. And so that probably means I'm not going to work at John Knox Village because you don't really have a work-at-home program. And so we've lost a few people that way. I know in accounting we've had at least 2 people leave because of found opportunities to work at home that we couldn't do. Escalation of wages. So, you know, the market is very desperate and irrational right now. When you think about how many, you know, people, when you look at the vacancies that we have at the Village, and you look at all the restaurants that are coming up in the Lee Summit area, and the hospitals need people. So there is a desperate market out there, somewhat irrational, giving very significant increases, you know, in wages because we're competing all for a limited resource. And, you know, that's a very, once that ship sails, it becomes very difficult to bring those things back into, you know, into a lower level. So it starts to drive inflation, right? Because it sets the bar and then it continues to move from that particular place. So what we're trying to do is not get into this as much as we possibly can. Vacant positions. So when you look at senior living and you look at the Village, you know, we've got vacant positions. They're driving our staffing agency cost. So we've got people coming into health services who, from an agency standpoint, are making probably twice as much as what we normally pay our people, driving a lot of our excess cost. We have the vacant positions impacting services and quality, which you experience every day. And our commitment is to how do we get to those service levels back to where you expect them to be and we expect them to be. And then the impact on revenue, because we don't have restaurants open. There's revenue opportunities that are not, you know, we're not capturing. And also then in the care center, because of limited staff, we can't get our census up to areas where, you know, it would potentially we've got a building that's probably running at about 50% or less occupancy. So there's a lot of capacity there that's not being used because we don't have staff to be able to ensure that there's a high level of quality. And then wage increases. I'll show you a little schedule that we have, but we've been increasing wages. We had a $500,000 budget this year on just the market adjustments that we've used almost all of that to try to improve our ability to recruit and retain people. Joe kind of talked about that there's this wage compression issue we still have out here. What that means is that as we bring new people in and we are hiring at these certain levels, well, we're not touching everybody. We're only touching the areas that impact revenue, that are frontline people that we can't recruit and retain. So it's a very targeted group of people that we're using, that we're applying this increase to. And so then as you move all of those wages up, and then you don't touch the ones above it, pretty soon you have leads and supervisors making very close or potentially even less than what the people that they're supervising. And so that sometimes has to be addressed. Yeah, Joe. Yep.
Well, people know that I'm on finance, so they ask all the time on the desperate and irrational, and yet somebody leaves or there's not enough staff. They say, why don't we just pay whatever it takes? And could you explain what % of our salaries have to do with the full budget and what the implications are of being desperate and irrational and just spending money on people?
I will, and I've got a slide for that. So thanks for queuing that up. So I will do that. So because it's very interesting. As I was going through some of the analysis, but we still are not addressing some of the compression issue. The idea strategically, what we've said is that we will wait till we fill these positions that start to drive the revenue, that then give us the capacity to be able to address the compression issues, so that it's not built on how do we increase monthly service fees to address the compression issue, as much as let's drive the other revenue lines, that can be driven by just filling positions first. And so strategically, that's how we're trying to approach it. Changing expectations of the workforce. There's just all kinds of programs out there that we're competing with. I saw in the news, was it last night, somebody's doing 4-day workday weeks, and it's not that they're doing 10-hour days, they're actually doing four days, 8 hours, and then if you have work left over, you can come in on Friday. I don't know, that doesn't work for me, but so that's, just an example of how, the expectations of the workforce, and we have a little bit more structure because we run a 24/7, and, really, we do need people here to take care of all of you, and that's, we're very committed to that community. COVID, it's not as big an issue as it used to be. Now it's one of those situations where we're running so tight on our staffing that when there is a COVID outbreak, what happens is that it creates a significant inconvenience. You might have to shut down a restaurant, or you might, we're running so tight and there's no people to come in and to replace them. It's while people are not sick for a long period of time, it's still very contagious. It still creates some very inconvenient situations, which ultimately impact you as much as anybody. And then obviously there's the burnout, and that's just something that's been through all of healthcare. It's just, long hours, working under significant situations. Right now, the understaffed really does create a lot of stress on people, in this type of an environment. So our job is really how do we continue to make the work environment a good place for the people that we are employing. And the happier we can make them, the happier they'll make you. I mean, it's kind of a situation that trickles down, but it is a challenge for us. So the village's labor is impacting levels of service in the dining program. You'll see here, I'll show you a turnover report, that shows how significant and why that's happening. Maintenance, grounds, salons, these are areas where turnover is really, just as it churns, it really impacts, the level of services. Labor is impacting the revenue in the care center, home health, and dining services. Here's where, Joe, this is kind of addresses your question. So labor is about 54% of our operating costs. So that's just the labor part. That's not benefits, okay? Benefits is somewhere around another 12 to 15%. So if you look, I was trying to look at what's our cost per FTE compared to last year. So our cost per FTE this year is up 22%. So and that's driven largely, our labor is actually down. Our labor cost, the dollars, if you compared it to last year, is down 3%. But our FTEs are down 20%. So when you think about that, we're only down 3% on our labor cost, our actual dollars from last year, but we have 20% less people working here. So that really is, the actual cost per FTE is 22% more than it was last year.
So then your people must be working harder.
Yes, they are working a lot harder. But also because we've had to give pay increases, right, to recruit people, to bring it in. So part of that, that 22% is wage increases. So what it really says is that if we think we're bringing back these 20%, right, at 22% more than what they cost last year, that's not a good formula, right? And so what we have to do is we have to figure out how do we manage the increase in our FTEs so that we don't, we're not going to be looking at a 22% increase in labor. So the question was, so how are you going to handle the compression issue? If you get a 22% increase in, this frontline part, what happens when you get to mid-management, things like that? So you add in another 25%, or what is it going to be? So what happens really is, how do we, first of all, become more efficient so you're not bringing back 20%, those 20%. Then the other side, it will be revenue. But it isn't, so some of this 22% is not directly wages. You won't see that that's exactly what it is. Some of it is efficiencies and things like that still happen. So I would say that we will still have to look at compression, but part of that formula still might be is, so do you have as many management people? I mean, you still have to look at how does this equation work, and we have to look at how do we reposition our labor force to still provide the services, but maybe with different types of processes so that maybe they require a few less people. Certainly 20% less is probably too many less, but there needs to be some savings in labor to help fund, some of these, changes in actual rates. So I don't know if that answers your question, Joe, but I think that's, yeah.
Does this happen with technology?
So the question was, could these efficiencies happen with technology? Absolutely. That's one thing that we've kind of got a little stronger focus right now on technology. We're looking at what can help us be more efficient, and what also then can provide greater resident engagement. So you may feel we don't have a lot more people, but technology could make you feel much more connected, much more in control, much more, satisfied with the way that we're running the village because you just have more information, or you're able, the services are much easier to handle through technology. So those are all things that we're exploring, but it takes a little while to turn a big ship like this, but we certainly are looking at the technology. Full-time equivalent. Yeah, sorry about that. I used an acronym there and didn't explain it. So FTEs, what that means is typically if we take we're assuming somebody works 40 hours a week. So we'll divide the total number of hours worked that week and divide it by 40, and that gives you the full-time equivalent. Okay. So what happens is we do have lots of part-time people here. They work 30 hours a week, 20 hours a week. And so what we end up doing is instead of talking about positions, we end up talking about full-time equivalents because it really talks about the hours worked. So here's that schedule I talked about, the $500,000 wage, the wage pool that we have for market adjustments. You can see that in this, we've actually given out by now almost about, I think there's about 22,000 left of this, but through May, this is supposed to have been a budget item for FY23. Well, you can see we started using it in January during the FY22 because it was so urgent. So it's impacted about 221 employees. This $402,000 of wage increases. So those are not the actual wages, those are the wage increases. This is the add-on, okay? And so you can see we've done dining services, EMS, village assisted living, the VCC, village helpers, public safety, billing, grounds, lifestyles, and operations. So those are the groups that we've touched recently to be able to help with retention and recruitment. So how do we measure the effectiveness of this? So we went back and looked at open positions as of December 20th, 2021. So this is before we issued the increases. We had 168 open positions at the village. By July 6, 2000, so this is after we've given all of the wage adjustments, we still had open positions of 154. So it improved, even though that says it's a negative, it's an improvement of open positions about 8%. And you can see it's really different in the different different departments or business units. The care center, had 61 open positions. By July, it was down to 38, so it had a 38% improvement. Assisted living, we gave increases. We had 15 open positions, and now at the July, it was 27. So it actually went the wrong way. It's 80% more than what we started with. So you can see some of the impacts in the different areas. I can say dining services is one of those areas where we gave an increase and it's up by 36%. Now, what's the rest of the story is that when you look at village assisted living, also the occupancy has gone up significantly, right? And so, we'd have to go back to what were the total positions available, in December versus what's in July, because we've needed more people in village assisted living because of the increase in occupancy. In the case of dining services, they have had much steeper competition with a lot more restaurants opening up. So while we're increasing the wages, the market is also increasing the wages and increasing it even more. So it's an evolving process where, Lori Johnson would say is, okay, we need to kind of look at where the market is again today in 6 months because it may have changed pretty dramatically. So those are some of the things that, you know, we see out of the labor market right now that is making things very challenging. Here's associate turnover. I know you can't read any of this, but if you look at the gold bar, this is the annualized number for 23, what we expect it to be. The orange bar is where it was in 22, and the blue bar is in 21. So you can see how much our turnover has increased this year compared to the last 2 years. And this is all of JKV. From an operations standpoint, you know, they took a pretty big jump in 22, and it's still a little bit worse here in 23. But look at dining services, okay? Dining services out here at 81%, when the last 2 years it was running somewhere around 32%. So, I mean, that's huge. The VCC, you know, not significantly different than last year, but it is, you know, it is still 25% worse than what it was in 2021. And in village assisted living, actually, it's been doing better. Better than 20, in 22 was better than 21, and then 23 is actually is better than, you know, 22. So we've seen some improvement there, even though you've seen more open positions. So there are some really significant dynamics going on that, you know, that really make this kind of a challenge. Okay, so we'll get into some financial ratios. And I'll try to break this down a little bit or explain some of this for the new people. If you haven't been in the Resident Finance Committee, some of this stuff might, and even since the last time I've talked to you, you might not remember what it is. So days cash on hand, what that means is if you take the village's total cash, you divide it by what it takes to run the village on a daily basis, which is how much? That's, I heard it right back there, 185, did you say 5? Yeah, $185,000 a day. So by the end of the day, we've spent another $185,000 today to kind of run the village. So when you divide that into our total cash, at the end of August, we had 209 days. So why that's important is investors look at that and they go, okay, if everything stopped today, how long could you run the village without any more cash? And we could run the village at least 209 days if we didn't have another penny coming in after today. So our covenant is with investors is 120 days. So we're well above the covenant. And when you look at this 209, if the stock market would have been where it should be at this time, we would have 24 more days of cash. So we would be sitting around about 233 days, and we're about also about a 1.5 million, I think, almost 1.8 million. We're almost 10 days behind in entrance fee proceeds as well. So, I mean, if everything was running the way it should be, we would be somewhere around 243 days right now. So you can see we're still not too far off of where we budgeted, but, you know, overall we're doing pretty well on our days cash on hand. Debt service coverage ratio. What this does is says this is the funds available to pay off principal and interest on our mortgage, right? And all the financing of all of our the village, and so it's about $8.1 million a year is our interest expense and the principal that we pay, and so right now it's at. Our cash available is at 1.45 times, which our covenant is 120, so we're pretty well over that. Our budget is 150, and I think we'll do fine with our entrance fee whenever we get back on track with our entrance fee proceeds, and also with the strong operating margin that we have. So our net operating margin, this is really our operating performance before you get into depreciation and interest and all that kind of stuff. It's not the change in net assets. So our margin has been running pretty well. We've been running at about 6%. And when you compare that to where we were last year at this time, which was pretty close to break even, what's really been driving it is our associate health insurance claims are about $700,000, $750,000 less than they were at this time last year. And then when you look at what has happened with assisted living, with the increase in occupancy, its operating contribution compared to last year at this time is about another $750,000. So that those two are having a really big impact on our operating margin right now. And so with our operating margin, what we do to get to adjusted net operating margin is we add entrance fee proceeds. Well, at the beginning of this year, we were running in negative entrance fee proceeds because we had refunds greater than entrance fees. Typically never happens that way. So in the first 3 months of the year, we have an annual budget of about $1.7 million on refunds. Well, by the first 3 months, we already hit $1.7 million. So we've done an adjustment. We've said, okay, let's expect at least $2.7 million, because we didn't have anything I think in July or August. So it's kind of getting back on track. But with that forecast and move-ins meeting budget, we should be entrance fee proceeds pretty close to 90% of where we expected to be at the $1.7 million refunds. And so if that happens and our operating performance continues as strong as it is, we will probably exceed the budget on our adjusted net operating margin at the end of the year. Right now, you can see it's been coming back as our entrance fee proceeds go up. Because no refunds, and also the entrance fee move-ins that we're getting. Everybody still awake out there? Okay. I'm having fun here, and just gotta hang in there with me. Okay. So, our action plans. Joe mentioned that in her report, and because what kind of drove this is we started talking about the headwinds. We just, with inflation going up the way it is, how does that really impact our move-ins in the third and fourth quarter? Well, we know we're going to have a really strong move-ins as far as Meadows 2, but how will things, and so we said, how do we move things forward? How do we take our results from the third quarter and kind of move it into the second quarter so that we can kind of be ahead of that curve if there is some headwinds? And so increasing our net proceeds from entrance fees and increasing non-resident revenue was part of senior living's action plan. And so Joe kind of mentioned we have increased our entrance fee prices as of October 1. So that's all gone up, and that should have created some urgency for people to get in earlier, right? So we've had some really strong move-in numbers for September. I think my last look is that we will be at our occupancy budget in senior living at the end of September. So if you remember in Joe's report, we were about 18 under. And so we're going to make up that gap in September. Improve occupancy, and support the EMS program growth. So continue to look at, the programs that EMS is getting started, making sure that we have a capital available. If you would look at an occupancy or a run chart for EMS, it's going like this. I mean, it is really going up. There's a lot of demand in the marketplace for what the EMS services. It's just, do we have the money to really invest in it, at the rate that maybe the market would like us to. It's kind of difficult because every van costs about 170, or every ambulance about $170,000. Not to mention that it takes 2 years to get one. So we just have approved a van or an ambulance for EMS. So, we're going to try to continue to support that situation. Assisted living, outpatient therapy is part of our assisted living program. They're working on a Parkinson's, specialized program. That's still in the works. But also to improve revenue by 10% in the second quarter. So if you take the first 2 months of the first quarter and first 2 months of the second quarter, it's increased by 12.2%. So they are already moving that forward. And then upgrading living spaces, finishes. So I think I talked to Melody. They expect to have 5 of those new upgraded finish units completed by the end of the month in September and also filled. The VCC, there's been little progress in this area, modeling to optimize the payer mix. So we're just trying to figure out how do we, minimize the impact of the care center on our financial statements. And it's really a challenge when you're running census at 125, when you're running utilization about 50% of that building. So Joe has reminded me I need to explain what is payer mix. So when you're in the care center, there's really 3 major classifications of payers. You have private pay, which runs at about, I'm going to take a wild guess here, but I think it's somewhere about $320 a day for a private pay person at the care center. And then if you're on managed care or Medicare, that number per day runs somewhere about north of $500 a day. And then if they're on Medicaid, it runs somewhere around $180 a day. And so if you have a lot of Medicaid in your population, if it's 30% or 70%, it really makes a big difference on how your revenue turns out, right? Because the more Medicare A or managed care, the better, or private pay. So that's why we're, and the other part of that optimization is sometimes it takes more staff to do the Medicare managed care than it does the Medicaid or the private pay. And so as we try to match up the limited resource of staff, based on those payer mixes, how do we optimize the bottom line? And it's kind of tricky because, we could end up saying, okay, let's just do a lot of Medicare and managed care, but all of a sudden you have no staff left over to take care of, the Medicaid or private pay. And that's not a formula that works for us. And so, it's really kind of understanding the push and pulls of the reimbursement versus, the demands on staff. We did get an increase in Medicaid reimbursement, probably one of the largest that we've seen in years. It's somewhere around $25 a day, which will take us pretty close to almost $200 a day. So that will be a big help. And then trying to reduce agency costs. We talked about that early on, is that when we bring agency, it costs twice as much as the actual staff that works for the village. And so how do we keep improving, graduating CNAs, making sure that we get LPNs and things like that so that we can take out some of that staffing agency. So this is still a puzzle for us. We're still working through it, trying to manage some of that. Home and community-based service is doing well. We changed the marketing approach. I think you've probably all heard about that. And if you look at hospice census, I think it's up almost 70% from the beginning of the year, 60, 70%. And home health, I think, is up at least 11% from the beginning of the year. But over the last 3 months, it's probably gone up almost 30-some percent. So that is working really well for us. Okay, budget considerations. So we're now getting ready for the FY24 budget. We start early. We try to get this thing done by December so that we can get all the right approvals. Some of the things that we have to, key consideration, we've talked about already, is the work environment, and staffing. We've got to look at those number of FTEs and the wage rates. And as we look at staffing plans, challenging departments, business units to say, okay, how can you re-engineer? Because we already know your open positions, and if I show you what they cost to fill, the increase of your year-over-year budget is too big. So to stay at a reasonable increase year over year, how many positions do you not fill, and how do you change your business to still increase your staffing or your service levels? So that is really probably the most difficult thing that we've ever asked of our managers, to be able to kind of get in this situation. But it's really important. And so Todd, I know from the food side of it, he has a Rubik's Cube every day that he's trying to work through. And, I know we still have a lot of opportunities there, but it's not because we're not continuing to work through some of the re-engineering process. So really the goal will be, how do we return resident service levels to what we experienced before COVID, trying to manage that overall cost so that the year-over-year increase doesn't drive monthly service fees over what we would be reasonable, given the inflation that we have of 7 or 8%, and all of the wage increases that we've had. We still, we can't afford to, get very crazy on the monthly service fee side. We kind of work in a very unique situation. A lot of companies can go, okay, well, this is what it cost us, so let's just change the prices, and everybody needs to buy it at the new price, right? If they want it, they're going to buy it. Well, unfortunately, you have bought into the village with a promise that we're going to take care of you for life. We did a financial assessment that said, here's the assets you have, and how long is it going to last while you live at the village, and hopefully they're going to last, for your actuarial life here. But if we begin to raise the monthly service fees way beyond the assumptions in our actuarial assessment, financial assessment, well, we're going to spend all your money, and guess what? We still have to support you, right? At the end of the day, we have made we have an obligation to you, and if we spend your money early, we're going to be still, at the end of the day, taking care of you on the back end of it. And so that's a dilemma that most businesses don't have to deal with, but we do. And so it's a very, very delicate dance in how we increase monthly service fees to make sure that in the long run, it's still not going to impact your financial situation to the point where you're on resident financial assistance. So, and I think that is it. Questions? Maria's got a comment.
I have 5 little bullet points. I'll go through them quickly. I read an article over the weekend, and the statistic kind of hit me in the face. In 2020, there were, and it was like a government labor department or something. In Missouri, there were, in 2020, 113 people for every 100 jobs, okay? In 2022, there's 47 people for every 100 jobs. So we're dealing with that every day, but when I read that, it was kind of like, oh, gosh. Okay, number 2. The technology Kim talks about to become more productive or to offset having being understaffed. An example of that is we bought a riding vacuum over and it's right now it's over at the Meadows. Have any of you seen it, residents? Okay, so it takes about 10 minutes to vacuum a floor of Meadows West and about 30 to 45 minutes to do the whole building, just the corridors, right? That's less than half that it would take if somebody was doing this. And so we're looking at how can we get more of those, right? So we can keep the common areas to the cleanliness level that people expect, the corridors, but do it with fewer people. I was staying at a hotel visiting my daughter and got back kind of late one evening, and you know those Roombas that you can buy in your house that vacuum for you? It was like a toddler size. And it was going around the corridors in the hotels. So we're, without a person. So it's just programmed. So, how can we do, when people say technology, they often think of computers, right? But there are other things that we need to test, and some may work and some may not. I was going to refer back to where Kim showed the pay increases by department. And I can tell you, it was back in May, I think, that we were down like 5 people in grounds, and then Billy also left, and so we went down to 6. We raised those rates, and we filled all those positions back. But guess what happened? We lost them again, went back down to 5. We're now full again, except for the apprentice mechanic. But that's what happens is, talking about the churning, it's like, we had some of our former really good employees come back to grounds when we, because the current associates said, hey, we're raising the rates, so they came back. But then other people raised their rates, and guess what happened? We lost them again, so now we had to fill them again. And that drain, Anna, gets to what the supervisors and managers are dealing with when you're expressing, about them. That's what's exhausting them, that burnout. I actually had people come to me and say, can I give up my raise this year to pay the front line more? So, and that, I don't say that at the supervisor level, but like at the manager and director level, they just want to do a good job for you all. They would rather have full team and their lives be easier than to get pay increases. And that's how committed our managers and directors are. And then finally, yes, Kim mentioned the ambulance. We just had a fluky situation last week. We are on a 2-year waiting list. We put our name in for 2 ambulances. You don't have to put any money down. But then when it gets to you, you have to pay a little bit, and then they start the production. So the ambulance company contacted Brian last week, and they had a demo ambulance that was supposed to be going to the city of St. Louis. And the city of St. Louis rescinded their acceptance of the vehicle, so they called and offered it to us. And so we robbed Peter to pay Paul, and it has 20,000 miles on it, but it's never provided patient care. And so once we get it fitted with our radio system and the proper logoing on the side, we'll have a new ambulance to get rid of the oldest one. Yes, so that's how that happened. And yes, it does. It does. So I want to thank Diane and all the other ambassadors, and re-thank those of you who came to the gala or donated toward a basket or helped decorate or whatever. It really was a lovely event with a really good outcome. And I know we continue to amaze people. Collins and Webb was just the architect that we're using for the EMS building, the villager renovations, and some other things. They have I call them youngsters, young people. They were some of the last ones to leave. They're like, who would have thought the retirement community would have the best party in town? So, but it got people engaged in our mission, which is to raise money for those important causes. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know Brian was really touched by that, and anything we can do to keep Brian happy is good. So anyway, so I just wanted to bust in there because I had those thoughts as Kim was talking, so I'll give the microphone back.
Well, I'm all done. Now you can wake up and, enjoy your day. So unless you do have any questions, any comments, we usually have a pretty dynamic discussion at our quarterly meetings and in our finance committees. I wouldn't expect anything different from the rest of you. So all right, well, thank you, and enjoy these wonderful next couple days. It's going to be nice out.
Thank you. That was a lot of information, so we're going to have to take some time to think about all of that. Our next meeting, our general meeting, will be November 7th, and the topic will be Parkinson's disease. And a representative from the Michael J. Fox Foundation will speak, and then Anthony Colombato from John Knox will also remind us of the services that we already have in place here. So it should be very informative. And remember, if you see a neighbor or friend who hasn't been to our meeting, invite them to come. See you then.